So welcome everybody to She Speaks, Young Women on Faith, Social Justice and Transformational Acts. This session is led by the Girls Brigade International's Delegation of Hope. My name is Claire. I'm one of the Vice Presidents of Girls Brigade International, a movement that has been working with girls for over 128 years in over 50 countries. Now, earlier this year, we were really inspired and encouraged, weren't we, by a young woman who spoke at the US presidential inauguration. Yes, I'm talking about Amanda Gorman, who really challenged and inspired us with her words. And I'm so delighted to welcome another team of hope bringers and generation shapers who are going to challenge you with their words. And I take Amanda's words and paraphrase them really slightly, that this team of young women that you're about to hear from, they believe that there is always hope if we're brave enough to see it, if only we are brave enough to be it. And these young women are definitely brave enough to be it. This is our Delegation of Hope they are young women, young female leaders from Australia, Nigeria, UK and Zambia. And they are going to use film and spoken word pieces and drama to really share how they're passionate about shattering mental health stigma, ending violence against women, and eradicating gender-specific religious persecution, as well as improving girls' access to education. I really hope that you're inspired by them and see the importance of engaging with young women of faith and how faith-based organisations play a critical role in helping pursue gender injustice. So, we're also delighted that this team is going to be joined at the end for a panel discussion by some of these global experts from around the world. They're going to talk a little bit about the experience that they've had as women of faith in leadership and some of the obstacles that they've encountered. But before we begin the session, let me just share very briefly about what is Girls Brigade International. I'm sure that some of you have never heard of our movement, but we're one of the oldest and largest faith-based movements for girls in over 50 countries. And with our trained and passionate volunteers, we mentor and invest in girls. We equip them with life skills, with leadership training, really providing safe spaces for girls to become all that God has created them to be. We run weekly community groups from the Caribbean islands to the Pacific islands, across Europe, down to the Caribbean and Asia. We also have leadership equipping training in every country, as well as some amazing social entrepreneur projects, which you'll hear about today. So our Delegation of Hope is an example of how we're investing in young women and really hoping to see young women of faith's voices amplified at the UN level. But that's enough for me. I'm going to hand over to the team. It's a privilege to welcome Ruth and Caitlin. And we all know that girls experience lots of different obstacles, and one of them is getting an education. There are over 130 million girls missing from classrooms around the world. 130 million. Caitlin and Ruth are two young women who are really passionate about improving girls' access to education, and they're going to share why and what they're doing to help girls gain more opportunities and gain empowerment through education. So welcome, Caitlin and Ruth.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Robinson. I'm 19 years old and I've been attending the 45th Brisbane Girls Brigade group for just over 7 years. Before I start, I just want to let you know I'm in Australia, so I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. I respectfully acknowledge the Turrbal and Yuggera peoples, the original custodians of the land on which I present from today. I also acknowledge that we have a number of parties joining us via webinar today from other regions of Australia. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of those regions and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging.
Hello, my name is Ruth Utulu from Girls Brigade Nigeria.
We are excited for the opportunity to share with you our passion for girls' education and how in many countries, faith-based actors like the Girls Brigade are stepping into the gap where formal education for girls is not possible by cultivating and developing safe spaces for girls to learn informally and develop their talents and skills. Like any issue, it's easy to focus on numbers and statistics. Claire mentioned that 130 million girls are missing from classrooms around the world. Let's watch a short film to meet one of those fortunate girls.
They said I was lucky to be in school at age 14. Can you believe that? Lucky, they said. Well, truth be told, I sometimes consider myself lucky. I've met so many of my peers were in school at that age. I love studying. I still do. I loved my school uniform. And especially the way we wore it. Green skirts, white top, and a necktie. That always made me feel like a professional as an aspiring doctor. I was hopeful about my future because I had older brothers that had graduated from the university and one who was still an undergraduate. I rehearsed in my head how I was receiving, my certificate in my graduation gown. Have you ever done that too? One day, my uncle came visiting, and in my usual habits, I positioned myself to instruct so that I could be the bearer of the latest news in my family. I began to blush as he talked about how I was growing into a beautiful woman with a beautiful face and a beautiful shape. You can all agree with that, don't you? But suddenly, my heart began to race. When I began hearing the other details of the conversation, my uncle had just told my dad that I wasn't supposed to still be in school at age 15 because of how much I was developed. But I thought hard, how can that be a problem? My uncle went on to say, if I'm not giving into marriage, I may become wayward and bring shame to the family, seeing that my body can easily lure men. I waited for my parents to say something, to say my uncle was wrong. I waited, but they stayed silent. The decision was made. God, my heart sank. I could literally feel my heart coming out of my body. Hot tears rolled down my cheeks as my shaky legs were trying to find balance. Could this be the end of my lifelong dream? My future was decided and I didn't have a say in it. I fought the decision the best way I could. I went. I pleaded. I pleaded with family members to intervene. I even ran from home. But the same person I sought solace from brought me back home. My teachers were worried. My classmates were worried. The school sent a delegation, but my dad didn't budge. A date was fixed, and that was it. I was dressed to meet a man I barely knew. A day people looked forward to. I dreaded mine. A day bright faces beams with excitement. Mine was covered with sorrow. A wedding night couples should cherish. I feared mine. I was led down the aisle like a lamb to the slaughter of the wedding day. Here I am today, telling my story, speaking eloquently, and with a degree in wonder how. Let's say the luck they said I had actually worked for me eventually. The husband I was married to happened to be a young man that had a degree and is still aspiring for more. I was lucky he allowed me to continue schooling. Was it difficult? Sure it was. While my mates had only their books to study, I had pregnancy to deal with, children to nurse, husband to satisfy, and a home to keep. I'm only of luck and determination. I never became the doctor I planned to be, but at least I have a degree and a chance to tell my story. But I'm just one of the many girls that this has happened to. Their stories are different to mine. Their circumstances too. But we all share the same shattered dreams. Please, can you help us stop this from happening to the next generation? Please, will you join us today to help girls get the education they deserve? Thank you.
This powerful performance highlights the many obstacles that girls and young women inside and outside of the Girls Brigade global family encounter when trying to exercise their human right to receive an education. I'm aware that my story is slightly different from Ruth's. Being born in Australia has afforded me privileges that Ruth, as a Nigerian girl, didn't automatically have. I'm so grateful that my formal education was never in question, but my local GB company, which I still attend weekly, also became an informal learning space. It's helped me to thrive and grow in my faith and leadership. In 2018, my Girls Brigade leaders took us to visit an organisation called Chaplain Watch. We went on a Friday night, travelling into Fortitude Valley, a place in Brisbane, my hometown, where many young people meet, often participating in destructive behaviours. In the middle of the city chaos, amidst the raging clubs and darkened alleyways, we arrived at a small office space that had been transformed into a simplistic hospital ward. The room was set up as a place for people to come and receive care under the watch of medical volunteers, so they did not find themselves in unsafe situations or overexhaust our local ambulance service. I'd never known about this organisation, and I was immediately transfixed with their mission, their care and compassion for others. I went home that night with a shift in my worldview. In the part of my city I associated with so much homelessness and hurt was an organisation that was making a difference. The best part of that week at Girls Brigade was realising that I had the power to be part of that change. On that night that my leader took us to Chaplain Watch, she was providing us with a profoundly influential experience. She was providing us with an education. She allowed us to see that there were spaces where our passion for social justice was desperately needed. That night, our learning did not take place at desks with pens and paper at the ready. It was a distinctly different experience for the formalities surrounding my days spent at high school, but both forms of education have shaped who I am today. The Girls Brigade is helping girls around the world to achieve their God-given potential through formal and informal education. In Caribbean and Americas Fellowship and the Asia Fellowship, girls also receive school sponsorship to assist in their formal learning, over and above the other empowering activities and informal education already offered by Girls Brigade. In our Pacific Fellowship, my home fellowship of Australia, and the Pacific, girls can choose to take part in a 3-part leadership course, which I actually have participated in myself. Within this course, girls commit to a 3-day solo in the Australian bush.
In Africa, the Girls Brigade has programs to empower girls and young women through formal and informal education. In various African countries, girls get sponsorship through school and colleges. One of such programs is the Ebonyi Girl Project in Nigeria, initiated because of the growing numbers of uneducated and underpowered women and girls in Ebonyi State, Nigeria. There has been an alarming rate of school dropouts due to teenage pregnancy or inability to pay for their tuition. This set of young girls gets married to men who are not committed to marriage, thereby leaving the women to fend for themselves and their children. This task becomes daunting because they lack employable skills for high-end jobs. The Boy and Girl project set out to train not so privileged girls and women in fashion designing, crocheting, hairdressing, and entrepreneurship. The project has had 10 graduates so far. We are so proud of that. 10 lives have been positively affected. 10 generations have been given a chance to a better life. 10 women have gotten a voice, and 10 women have been empowered. The girls and women were given the opportunity to contribute to the nation's COVID-19 response when the governor of the state awarded the group a contract to produce 200,000 face masks and provided the materials needed for that. That singular project gave over 50 women an opportunity to make a living by learning how to make face masks.
The impact of informal education in the Girls' Brigade may seem subtle, but it is a powerful force in the fight for gender justice. The Girls' Brigade values gender equality and advocacy work. It teaches girls to use critical thinking around the mechanisms of our society, and it challenges the societal norms which fuel inequality within our community. Empowering girls with skills in critical thinking enables participants of the Girls' Brigade to identify inequality and advocate for social justice in their context. In the Girls' Brigade, a COSOC statement to the United Nations preceding the 65th session of UNCSW, strengthening human rights literacy amongst faith actors was identified as a very important step to realizing Agenda 2030. Teaching girls about social justice in informal learning settings ultimately empowers and equips them to participate in international decision-making. In light of COVID-19, we need girls who are equipped with the tools to critically appraise and challenge international policies and proceedings that affect their way of life. The realization of girls' education is an issue on the minds and hearts of people across the world. And we must strive to realize the formal education, which is a vital aim of the Sustainable Development Goals. But I think we need to remember the power of informal education in lighting a fire in girls' hearts. The girls whom we empower today will ultimately lead our world tomorrow. I hope that that world is one where all children receive a quality education. For now, let's start by showing girls that they can make a difference, showing girls that they can change the story. That is the power of education. That is the power of Girls' Brigade. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruth and Caitlin. Just an example of two young women who have come through Girls' Brigade from a very young age and really had their lives transformed from the skills that they've learned. And that's my story too. I joined Girls' Brigade when I was 3 years old, and I'm now 38, and it was an incredible learning experience. Now, we all know that there are many barriers to girls receiving education. Barriers can include patriarchal attitudes, poverty, as well as child marriage. But the fact is that there are families around the world that would love to send their daughters to school, but it's simply not safe for them to go to school. School is not a safe place. Maybe they have to walk kilometers in the bush. Maybe there's no toilet facilities in a school, and a girl is vulnerable when she has to leave the premises. We know that male violence against women and girls is insidious. It pervades all cultures and it takes many different forms. I'm really delighted to invite Nellie, one of our amazing GB activists in Zambia, to share her experience and how she is supporting young women in her community and advocating against violence against women. Nellie, it's wonderful for you to join. You are one of our passionate advocates on social media who speaks so much about this issue. I know you're passionate about it. Can you just share with all of us, why are you so concerned about this issue? Why does it touch you personally?
Thank you, Claire. I'm so passionate about eradicating violence against women and girls because I believe there are a lot of girls and women who are abused and violated across the world. And I have a story, and this is a story that made me realize, and I developed a passion for it after hearing it from someone close to me who is a friend and a sister. And this is her story. So there is actually this girl who at some point was staying with an uncle in a different town from her parents. And she was schooling there with them for some time. And the uncle took advantage of her from the age of 12 until to somewhere around when she was 17. The uncle abused her sexually most of the times. And it used to happen when she knocks off from school in the afternoons, because at that time, the aunt would not be around. And it went on for a number of years. And she had no one to share this story with. And she kept it until at some point when she had to go visit her mom in a different town again. And at that point, when time for schools opened, she refused to go back to the uncle's place. And it was at that point when she opened up to the mom about how the uncle has been taking advantage of her, and why she felt not so secure to go back and stay with her uncle. So, and after she shared everything with her mom, the thing her mom did was to ask her to be quiet and to be silent, never to share this with anyone, as it would bring confusion in the family and it would disturb the uncle's marriage. And that's how she kept quiet. And as we all know, her life was not normal like any other life. And she was holding up a lot of things, and she blamed herself for a lot of things, and that disturbed her school and just her well-being. It was hard for her to interact with people. So until at some point, that's how she shared with me. And at that point, that's when I realized that a number of girls and women are really being abused in our homes and everywhere. And most of them are even being abused by people who should protect them. And that's how my passion comes about. And I'm here to talk about it and just make sure that if there's any person who is silent out there, they can be heard. And it's after they are heard and they speak up that they'll begin to heal, because they can't keep everything to themselves.
Thank you so much, Nelly, for sharing that story. I do know that you had permission from your friend to share it today, and it really highlights the fact, isn't it, around the culture of silence that can pervade abuse and the stigma, you know, as well. And as we've been talking, Nelly, you know, there is violence against women is insidious. It goes across all different cultures, and one of the forms is street harassment. And in the last 2 weeks in the United Kingdom, we've had a horrific case of a young woman who was kidnapped and murdered just by walking down the street. And nearly every young girl I speak to has a story about feeling unsafe in a public space, whether that's in the UK or further afield. And can you just share a little bit about, you know, have you experienced street harassment? You know, what's your experience of it, Nelly?
Okay, I have a personal story on street harassment, and Claire, you're aware, and you know that I'm a runner, and I take running as a hobby, and it's something I enjoy doing, and I've developed a passion for it. And my preference time of running is before I go for work. So I prefer to run around 5 so that I have an hour to get back and prepare for work. So it happened late last year, when my day started. Usually I would leave home at 5 and come back around 6. So on that day, I started my journey, and I had kilometers. I had my personal goal to meet on that day. And just before I could cover like a kilometer, because I ran on the roads, at least the terrain is clear, and it's a bit clear just to run where it's wide enough and very visible. So on that day, I started my run as usual, full of energy and excited about covering my kilometers for the day. And at that point, when I started running, I realized there was a vehicle, because it's just on the side of the road, and vehicles would come and just everyone minds their own business on the road. And I took it like that on that day until I saw this vehicle that pulled over, because I was running and they were driving, were heading the same direction. And when that vehicle pulled over, they greeted me. And just for polite sake, I retained the greeting and went about my business. But that did not end there. Apparently on that vehicle, I think there were 2 or 3 men, wherever they were coming from and where they were going, I didn't know. And they started following me. And I became a bit of an uneasy, but I still continued with my business until they pulled over. They had to cross the road and come to the lane where I was. And they were asking me to join them on the vehicle. And at that point, I don't know what I was thinking. And it was too early and there weren't any people coming. And it was just me and that vehicle, those men on that car. And I don't know, I still don't remember what happened, but I continued running. Even when I knew that that was a vehicle, I couldn't run faster than it, but I still continued running. And at some point, I just saw a cave. That's where I turned from. And at that point, I realized it was a bit difficult for a car to drive past through that. And I kept running until at some point I saw a man. I think that was a security guard guarding some premises somewhere. And that's how, when those guys saw that I met someone ahead of me, and I stopped when I saw that man, like just seeking for help and rescue. That's how those men proceeded and went back and stopped following me. So that was my harassment story. And now every time, because as I earlier explained, running for me is a passion and it's a hobby, something I enjoy doing, but it has brought fear. And since then, I feel I'm limited. I can no longer just wake up at 5 and start my run and just go about my day the way I would want it to be. I just feel limited in a lot of things because every time my alarm goes for 5 and I'm supposed to run, I have to think of brave ways I'm going to put on the road just in case someone comes. What am I going to do? I think that just puts more stress and just the anxiety. I'd still say I don't run as I'm supposed to be, because always I have to think of brave ways on how I'm going to escape that. And that has been my story on street harassment.
Thank you so much, Nelly. I think a lot of women will identify with situations where we felt that we've had to change our behaviour because of feeling unsafe in public. And you know, I'm cheering you on Strava in the morning when you do go out for your run. And one thing I love about you, Nelly, is that you refuse to remain silent in the face of this injustice. You know, so tell us a little bit. You know, your heart's broken about this issue. What are you doing to transform this issue in your own community?
Thank you. So what I'm doing basically, first and foremost, I think I'm using the social media. I'm using the media platforms to make people aware of violence against women and girls and not to be silenced, to speak about and warn people or encourage people out there that's still being cared for. So one of the forms I use to talk about this and just express myself is the Thursdays in Black. As I'm sure you noticed, most of us are in Black today. It just tells us that we're tired and we're looking forward to a day when we'll have zero violence against women and girls. So personally and as an organization, we've joined the Thursdays in Black campaign just to speak up about this violence and see to it that it comes to an end. Apart from it, as a Girls Brigade member, we meet nearly every week, and it's at such platforms and such gatherings that we speak up, and I still speak out against violence against women and girls. And we still join all other global campaigns that are in line with eradicating violence against women and girls.
And Nelly, you are a member of Girls Brigade, a very active member of Girls Brigade in Zambia. And there are people from faith-based organisations that are watching this webinar. What do you think is the role of faith-based organisations in helping end male violence against women and girls?
Thank you. So what I think about the role of faith-based organizations in eradicating violence against women and girls is, as faith-based organizations, we need to be able to create a safe space for everyone, victims, survivors, and just everyone. We should be able to create that safe space. We should be able to create that space where everyone would be free to air their views, connect, and just talk about different issues affecting their lives. And another way for Girls Brigade, as it has all generations, we encourage peer-to-peer mentorship. Girls and women should be able to relate to people of their age and just share and talk about this thing openly and find ways and solutions together. Faith-based organizations also should aim at valuing people, valuing victims, valuing survivors, and empower them, teach them, and just power them on self-esteem. And because we believe when one has self-esteem, they'll be able to speak up, they won't be silent, and a lot of things will move and will fight this injustice together. And as Girls Brigade, one of the things we do is we value people and we value all people and we treat them equally. As that's also one of our principles, where all people are equally valued. We promoted a just society where all people are equally valued. So for me, faith-based organizations have a role to play, and we can do this with God being our helper. Thank you.
Thank you, Nellie, for sharing your story and your experiences so bravely and so courageously. You're such an inspiration to me, and I know many other people around the world. Nellie, thank you. Now, unfortunately, too many Girls Brigade members around the world have experienced the devastating impact of violence in their lives. Some of you may remember that 7 years ago, the Chibok girls were kidnapped from their school in Nigeria in the middle of the night. Some of these young women were members of our Girls Brigade family. Many still remain missing. And since then, there's been even more girls and young women kidnapped across Nigeria and the rest of the world simply because they wanted to go to school. Here is their story. Nellie, you're going to have to unmute yourself.
We were sat in our class the day they came for us. As the teacher went on and on for what seemed like hours, I was a bit bored and hungry. I was already looking forward to sharing the latest gossip with my friends, and I was not concentrating at all. Normally, I loved my lessons at our boarding school, but today I was distracted. As I looked out of the window, my eyes were drawn to the far gates. There was some commotion happening, and before I could distinguish the words, I heard shouts. Truck burst through the gate, and men in military-style clothing jumped out, with guns pointed lazily into the sky, like the ants under a rock. They quickly moved in all directions at once. My blood ran cold. I pushed the chair away, stood up, and I screamed. I knew exactly what this was. We heard all about these raids in other schools. They would come for us because we were receiving Western education. My classmates, my friends, all headed for the gates. The first ones jumped over and ran for the trees to hide. They were lucky.
The men grabbed us and told us not to be afraid. There were soldiers come to save us, but that was a lie. They loaded us into the vehicles. There were too many of us, and I know I was standing on someone's back, but I couldn't move. Girls were crying everywhere. my best friend, was quietly singing a song to soothe us. The 3 days we traveled, by truck, boat, and walking, we were so tired. Some of my classmates didn't survive the journey, or were buried in a hole in the middle of nowhere. When we finally arrived, the men were waiting for us. They divided us up between them, and each of us were conquered into submission, again and again.
Our days were filled with cooking, cleaning, learning scriptures, and listening to a man talk about war and our duty and the right way to live. They gave us clothes to wear and spoke of violence and paradise, no matter what the cost. Eventually, we said whatever they wanted us to say in order to survive, but not my best friend. They came for her time and time again, and they beat her so badly. They said it would all stop if she just renounced her Christian faith and be saved. Then they'd send her home. But every time, no matter what they said to her, she refused.
We tried to hide her. We told her to say what they wanted to hear with her lips and not her heart. But she refused. And then they came for her and took her away. We heard her sing her soothing songs. We heard her cry out from beatings. Then we heard from her no more.
Then one day, they loaded many of us back onto trucks, those of us who had been obedient. There were some who stayed behind, who had become wives. Their new status as a result of being adopted made their ability to make sound choices conflicted. But many of us said whatever was necessary to go home. I was worried that my father will know what had been done to me. There was no hiding it, but still, I was glad to go home. And when my best friend's parents saw she wasn't with us, I told them this story of Leah's soothing songs, of Leah's defiance in the face of hatred, and Leah's courage in holding on to faith despite it all. And together, we'll wait for her return.
Together we wait.
Together we wait.
Together we wait.
Together we wait.
This is Leah's story in Leah's country. What is yours?
19th of February 2021 marked 3 years since Leah Sharibo was kidnapped by Islamic militants in northern Nigeria. Her parents haven't heard from her since. And like this dramatic monologue reveals, young women like Leah are at risk of male violence, but they're also targeted because of their Christian faith. Jessie, Caitlin, along with Helen from Open Doors International are going to share more about how gender-specific religious persecution impacts girls and young women around the world. Welcome.
We would like to welcome Helen Fisher to our session today to speak with us about gender-specific religious persecution. Fisher has tracked trends related to women and religious persecution over the past decade and is the Global Gender Persecution Specialist for Open Doors International. She's been invited to speak as an expert by the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief, the US Ministerial on International Religious Freedom, and various government bodies from the UK, Norway, and Denmark. Today, we will be speaking with Helen about gender-specific religious persecution and the role of faith-based organizations such as Girls Brigade in addressing this issue.
It's really great to have you with us, Helen. And some of us have some knowledge on what gender-specific persecution is, but many of us don't. So can you share a bit more about it with us? Specifically, what is gender-specific persecution? And what are the common forms of gender-specific religious persecution that Open Doors focus on?
Well, it's a real privilege to be here today and to talk to you about gender-specific religious persecution, which, let's admit it, that's a real mouthful, isn't it? So very often we use the acronym GSRP. What it is essentially saying is that global trends regarding religious persecution are gender-specific. They are not gender indifferent. Some of you will be familiar with Open Doors World Watch research that comes out every year. It lists the 50 countries most hostile to the free practice of Christianity. And over the past 4 years, Open Doors has edited a gender-specific religious persecution report to give a more precise, complete picture of global persecution dynamics. And it has shown what Leia's story has really illustrated for us. It has shown that 4 violations broadly express themselves along the lines of stereotypical gender vulnerabilities of social context. In other words, it's really important to examine this intersection between a person's freedom of religion or belief human rights and their human rights with regard to gender equality. And you'll notice on the slide that the arrow of gender inequality on the women's side is bigger. And if we added age into that, it would increase even more. What this ends up looking like is something kind of like a crime drama where we say, well, actually, if you were a policeman and you had to solve a murder mystery, you would differentiate between motive, means, and opportunity. And so what we end up identifying is that very often the motive is to punish or coerce the religious population, but actually the means very often is provided by gender inequality, which is kind of like saying it's kind of like a gun, which you can see really easily, or a poison that you're not really sure has been used. It takes a little more discernment. But actually we see a weaponizing of existing gender vulnerabilities as a means of fulfilling the motive of religious oppression. And as most of the countries Open Doors works in are organized in countries, are organized with prejudicial gender norms against women, this phenomenon primarily affects Christian women and girls. As we go further in trying to understand this, we're able to count it because we look at what we call pressure points. Pressure points are points of sensitivity on a person's body if you do martial arts, which I do not. But I'm told that there are nerve points where if you press on it, you get a disproportionate disabling of your opponent. And therefore, something like education for girls is a pressure point. That is to say, they might be abducted because it's against Western values, or it's because it's Western education, or it might be some of those pressures to be married young, like Ruth told us about, and that ability of a kind of normalized ability of a family to decide for the child, we're going to marry you off. So we have looked at this over the past 3 years, and you can go to our website to find that out. And we have the pressure points for this 4th year. And as you look at them, you'll see that for girls, for women and girls, the top points are forced marriage, violence, that is sexual and violence, other violence. And that really reflects these stories that we have heard already today. And I can confirm that those are very often targeted at young women, or more likely at teenagers. So these are our main findings for the year 2021.
Helen, we understand that trafficking plays a major role in GSRP. Are you able to share with us how these two issues relate to each other?
Yes, I am, and it's not really an obvious link, is it? But maybe I can try and make that clearer. The crisis surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic has actually had a big influence on GSRP dynamics to make the vulnerable more vulnerable. And that kind of generality goes to how trafficking works. Trafficking very often is targeting most vulnerable populations. And as we look at this for this past year, we have seen instances of trafficking as a form of religious persecution rise for both men and women in the past year, and particularly in Africa and Asia. Globally, 17 countries reported incidents of trafficked women and girls for religious reasons. And the countries engaged in conflict were most likely to report instances of sexual violence and trafficking. It is, as we look at all of this recurring geopolitical phenomenon to exploit minority communities in conflict situations, we know is well documented. What we're pointing to is something that the 2020 framework document from the UNHCR reported on, which was that traffickers commonly target forced migrant populations, making Christian refugees and internally displaced people particularly vulnerable. But I think in general, it is important to understand that trafficking is not really a standalone pressure point. It's one that's affiliated with other pressure points, and these all rely on what is seen as the value of a woman's sexuality. And in particular, the use of this strongly correlates with sexual violence and forced marriage. And why is that? Well, let's think about how they might relate. Over the past 3 years, reports of targeted seduction in our GSRP findings have tripled. They've gone up by 3 times, which is enormous. However, we're finding that when targeted seduction is not successful, trafficking actually works in conjunction with abduction to the same ends, which is actually to remove young women from their birth religious population. And in particular, daughters of pastors and prominent Christians are targeted. And these victims, this kind of multiple vulnerability is being recognized by a number of UN bodies. And it's something that is happening even this week. I have to tell you, while I was preparing this section on trafficking, I received an email from a close partner in a country I can't name, who had just been contacted by a Christian family because the wife of the pastor had just been deliberately abducted and trafficked. Let me just call this trafficked woman faith. And really the goal was to destroy the religious work of the whole family, her husband, the pastor, but also devastate the family and remove faith from her role in passing on her Christian beliefs. Please keep faith in your thoughts and prayers. She's been taken to a brothel in another town and the police are refusing to take the complaint. And so we are going to keep her also in our thoughts along with Leah Sharibu. So gender-specific attacks often targets areas of individuals' life where the society gives them value. And if they can bring shame on that area that brings them value, then it's supposed to bring shame on the individual community. And this helps the dynamic to be devastating.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for helping to educate us, Helen. I've got one final question, and that's, what can we do about it? How can faith-based organisations like the Girls Brigade and Open Doors International play an important role, but also work together with human rights organisations to tackle the issue hand in hand?
Well, it's very hard to know what to do, but actually having all of this research is incredibly helpful. And one of our co-workers has put it like this, saying that the report for them has unveiled the dynamics that are allowing Christian men and women to be persecuted. It's helped them to sharpen their vision of what is happening. And most importantly, it says, it helps us to speak out about justice in this area and call attention to harm that used to go unnoticed. And part of what is hidden in there is it helps us to bring up the importance of gender justice in Christian community survival. So in order to be able to do this a lot, it's really vital for government and local faith actors to coordinate with each other. And you know, in your question asking about what Girls Brigade and Open Doors International can do, then we're talking about local faith actors, faith-based organizations, because we are in a privileged position of influence in many countries. And thankfully, even though someone's choice to convert to Christianity may expose them to persecution, their same faith can be a resource for strength. So it's important for us to realize that a lot of these attacks are targeted on where we are valued as men and women, as I said earlier. Now, for men, this is very often as financial providers and as a church leader. And for women, it's wrapped up, as we've heard, in that concept of perceived sexual purity and family status. But we also see that there is a kind of insidious, indirect messaging, because when men are attacked in these areas, it's trying to isolate the man from his family, from his community, with that shame dynamic and that fear. And it attacks the very notion of family as a balanced, tight-knit community. And when women are attacked like this, and as we've seen highlighting forced marriage and trafficking and domestic abuse, well, it attacks the notion of marriage as a safe place of dignity and respect. So these often hidden religious persecution tactics, well, they actually reveal a need for religious communities to have very strong ideas about supporting, protecting, and valuing women and girls, and having the courage to denounce the risks and the abuse that they face. And the way this comes in is well within our agency. That is to say, that as a faith-based community, we are able to choose this. Since GSRP attacks how society values us, really we need to ask ourselves, what if we as a religious community agree that this is what gives us value? And this is determining of how badly that attack will impact the community. If we actually agree with the society as a whole that a woman or man's value can be damaged, then we will respond in a way that actually causes division, dysfunction, and a sense of unshakable shame for generations afterwards. Whereas actually, our faith tells us that our unchanging value comes from an unchanging and immutable God. So to put it really bluntly, local faith actors must actively resist in a myriad of ways, becoming unwittingly complicit in the persecution dynamic, because otherwise we will actually finish the work of persecutors in destroying the community. So we have a really powerful role to play, and Girls Brigade is at the forefront of ensuring that the next generation of girls has a strong and healthy understanding of their own identity, as we have heard. And it starts with girls knowing that they deserve an education, that they are being equipped to go forward, whether it's having sanitary necessities or other funds or just freedom so they can stay in school. But it also goes to teaching them that girls can speak out against the violence done to them. They can say it's not okay. And then finally, it extends to the whole community, affirming that actually you can never diminish the value of a woman or a girl by what you do to them. Open Doors is also committed to encouraging gender equality and has developed a specific faith-based curriculum. We call it Restorations, and we examine 5 identity areas in order to gently address harmful interpretations. Restorations is helping communities to see where they have choices and how they can choose to reject what is harmful, that's the orange boxes, and embrace the blue boxes as a way of affirming their faith's countercultural messages of identity and belonging. And if you'd like to know more about that, please do let me know. And of course, we want to work hand in hand with policymakers, because really a complex problem requires a multifaceted solution. So we invite policymakers and influencers to list religion as one of the compound vulnerabilities in many of their programs. And at the end of our report, we have a list of policy recommendations specific to gender-specific religious persecution for policymakers. So we hope, we dream, we pray that substantial, multifaceted community response to GSRP could actually significantly reduce or even eliminate gender-based persecution as a tactic.
Thank you so much, Helen, for sharing your expertise with us. I know your explanations have certainly helped me to better understand what is a very complicated issue, and the important role that both faith-based actors and faith-based organizations like Girls Brigade can play in combating gender-specific religious persecution.
Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you so much, Caitlin and Jessie. And Jessie's going to stay on because our final topic that we really want to discuss with you, that the team has chosen to discuss, is mental health and well-being. We know that COVID-19 has impacted girls and young women's lives in so many different ways, including in this area. I'm so delighted that we have Jessie and Hannah with us. They're both mental health professionals, so they're going to share their wisdom, their experience, and also going to introduce you to some incredible projects in Girls Brigade that is looking to encourage young women to look after their emotional well-being. So welcome, Jessie and Hannah.
Well, thank you, Claire. So my name's Jessie, I'm 24, and this is Hannah, who's 26. As Claire said, by profession, we're both mental health nurses, working with children, young people and families in England.
The Girls' Attitude Survey is an annual survey conducted by Girl Guiding in the UK that gathers information from over 2,000 girls and young women aged between 7 and 21 and issues that are concerning them. Survey in 2019 focused on happiness and well-being. It was sad to hear that fewer girls say that they are happy most of the time compared to 10 years ago. Just 1 in 4 girls aged between 7 and 21 describe themselves as very happy, from 41% in 2009. Unhappiness in turn has affected their confidence, their health and their studies. The 2020 survey found that there are persistent issues for girls that just are not going away. It is sad to hear that appearance pressure stands out among these issues as a barrier to girls being happy and confident in themselves.
And furthermore, the pandemic has taken a devastating toll on young people's mental health, with significantly more young people likely to feel anxious and depressed. The Prince's Trust Tesco Youth Index found that 1 in 4 young people admit they feel unable to cope with life since the start of the pandemic. I think it is important to note here that to a certain extent, it's completely natural for young people's mental health to be declining as we're encountering a global collective trauma from the pandemic. A study published by UK-based Thesos think tank evaluated studies that looked at the relationship between religion and well-being. The strongest positive correlation was found in the group of people engaging in social religious participation, with higher levels of participation in religion being beneficial to overall mental well-being. As with any research, it is important to approach with caution. Many people have personal stories of mental anguish and struggle as a result of suffering with their mental health. And being a person of faith, making it all the more important that faith-based organisations take a look inwards and think about what narrative they want to give to people in the future.
So where do we fit? In Girls Brigade, we work with women and girls from the age of 3. We are alongside them through many different life transitions, school changes, puberty, making life decisions, going off to university or into employment, the list goes on. This means we are with girls and young women through difficult times and therefore play a part in supporting their well-being. In the world of health and social care, we often hear the term that safeguarding is everybody's business. Now, I'd like to challenge you to also think about well-being in the same way, and that we think about young people's well-being as everybody's business. Children and young people have lots of people around them. They often have very big networks. If we think of what that might mean for a young person who's mentally unwell, there are people involved in what I would say is like the thick of it, the daily struggles and active treatment, often causing difficulties in relationships along the way. As a volunteer youth worker or leader, it's often easy to feel not particularly significant in someone's life or wonder what difference, if any, your involvement might be making. If that is you, I would like to let you know that you are making a difference. If we take a look at the 5 ways to wellbeing that's researched by the New Economic Foundation, groups such as Girls Brigade clearly meet these 5 areas. We are investing in girls, their skills and talents, building relationships with them. We encourage participation in social activity, learn new skills, encourage them to be leaders of the future, to give back to those around them, and to remain active. Now, I'm not trying to say those things are going to afford us immunity or result in any sort of instant recovery from a mental illness, but they play a part in the bigger picture. We have a role to play in the lives of young people. Sometimes that may be a small role that makes a difference. At a time where relationships can be strained, where there are pressures coming from all different sorts of angles, and a young person is receiving treatment for a mental illness, there is a space for something else, something different, something not entirely connected to the difficulties, but that something doesn't mean that something is any less important. With this role comes a responsibility to think about how we respond to the young people and what messages we give about hope for the future. Naturally, as with everything else, COVID-19 has complicated matters in terms of continuing to engage and maintain relationships with girls and families that we work with. But through creativity and determination, volunteer leaders have persisted by conducting online meetings, sending out packs to homes, getting in touch with families to check on their welfare.
Another way Girls Brigade has responded to the pandemic is by launching the Esther Collective podcast this year. I've personally had the opportunity to be a part of creating and developing this. We are a community of 18 to 30s women exploring the issues young women face with honesty, hope and a sense of humour. Our aim is to have honest and hope-filled discussions, and there are new episodes fortnightly on Spotify, iTunes and other platforms. The first series is focused on issues around body image and acceptance, a relevant topic since recent magazine articles in Glamour and Vogue reveal that body anxiety has increased because of the increase of video calling during the COVID-19 pandemic. While recognising this reality, we hope to provide a more hope-filled narrative around topics like healthy eating, self-esteem, comparison and self-acceptance from a Christian faith-based perspective. The second mini-series will explore wholehearted living with topics on identity, values, belonging and vulnerability. Overall, and highlighted in Girls Brigade's international written statement, which was jointly issued with other faith-based organisations like Christian Aid and the World Evangelical Alliance, in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic, many faith leaders and faith communities are positive and powerful forces, sharing accurate health information, modelling healthy behaviour, advocating for measures to address gender-based violence and supporting the most vulnerable in society.
Relationships are an essential element of contentment, and it may be no coincidence that 10 years ago, girls of all ages were socialising more and comparing their lives online less. So Jessie would now like to share with you all a personal story that really shows the importance of relationships that can exist by being part of a faith community like the Girls Brigade and the valuable support that this can create. This personal story was published as a blog post by COGO, which stands for Keep On Keeping On, an online space for teenage girls run by Girls Brigade Ministries. It is a great resource for youth leaders. Films, blogs, insights and support about living life to the full, enabling girls to keep on keeping on in a hope-filled way.
Brilliant. So this was written 4 years ago in 2017 by 20-year-old me. Recovery isn't all sunshine and rainbows. Did you know 1 in 4 people live with a mental health problem? I have been among them. Here's my story of living with an eating disorder and depression. A journey of pain, but also a journey of hope and transformation. Depression was spending every waking moment worrying about every single thing I did or said. Wishing I was dead was definitely my lowest point. You feel that the fight is too much and the mental and physical energy has been drained from you. I was so low, I was throwing away opportunities, throwing away creativity and losing my spark. Having an eating disorder was not just about weight loss and being obsessed with calories and restricting. It was pushing my entire family and friends away, having irrational thoughts that nobody liked me and that I wasn't enough. Mental illness for me was spending every day feeling like I was standing on the edge of a cliff and with one tiny step, I would fall to never return. It took courage and bravery to accept help. It felt too overwhelming, but I knew I couldn't carry on the way I was. I was fading into nothing and becoming more and more depressed. I couldn't even go to school anymore. After a pre-admission assessment to a mental health hospital, I started to engage with support. Child and adolescent mental health services offered me cognitive behavioural therapy, medication and dietitian appointments to cope with food increases. They even offered family therapy so my family could understand my illness better. It took months and months of hard work, but I slowly started to make changes and regain my life. The journey from then to now has been tough. Getting used to taking antidepressants was hard to come to terms with. I remember standing on the scales and then running into the toilet and staring at myself in the mirror. Tears, anger and frustration. But with the weight I gained, I also gained back life. I gained back energy and I gained back family and friends. People ask me if it gets easier. Yes, it does, but you can't do it without support. My family, who have been a massive rock, and I think my granddad's listening in, so I just want to say thank you so much, Nana and Granddad, for being a part of my support system. And my church community and Girls Brigade provided me with so much support, whether that was through the relationships that existed by being part of these faith communities, to the space they created to heal, to help me heal and learn again. It's the little steps that make the process manageable, and I encourage anybody hearing this who may be living with a mental health problem or knows somebody living with a mental illness to speak to someone about it. Be brave enough to seek out those conversations. So where am I now? Recovery isn't all sunshine and rainbows. It can be difficult. When I come across a bump in the road, I try and be rational about the situation. I put my faith in God and find my support in my family and Girls Brigade. I still struggle with my weight at times, wanting to fall back to bad habits to feel in control. Having to fight thoughts like that constantly can be exhausting, but recovery is worth it. It's worth the pain and it's worth the tears to know that I'm now living and not just surviving, knowing that I can make a difference in this world, injecting hope. I think we might have lost Hannah, so do you want me to carry on?
Yes, go ahead, Jessie.
So I guess finally, we want to talk about a contemporary hope-filled message. So in church, we pray no longer for purely miraculous healing. We pray for doctors and nurses looking after sick people, for people looking for cures and new treatments. This is reserved, however, for those with bumps and breaks, cancer and kidney problems. What then are we doing? For those living with mental illness. People are still in 2021 told, pray away the depression, exorcise the demons, appreciate what you have, justified with misattributed Bible verses. We are doing those people a disservice. People have always sought some sort of sanctuary in places of faith and religion. Therefore, it is essential we look inwards at how we are receiving and responding to these people. Now, I could stand here and give you my argument against the historical interpretation of demonic possession in the Bible, but debating interpretations is not going to get us anywhere. The Bible is full of people with struggles being used for great things. How about we ensure the young people we work with know about this? No one is looking for perfection before you are chosen for great things. If we turn to 1 Kings in the Bible, we can find the prophet Elijah praying that he should die because he doesn't feel good enough and does not feel able to continue. What we see next is not about judgment or shaming, as we often see in modern society when people express suicidality. We see a responsive God. Elijah is visited by angels who encourage him to get up and provide him with food. Now, we are unlikely to be visited by angels in our time of need. However, what I propose is that this is used as a framework in how to respond to those in need around us. Experience in different emotions is normal. If you look closely, you would find evidence of Jesus experiencing a whole host of emotions. Why then do we so often find people of faith being judgmental of those that are struggling with their emotions, or worse, reducing their experiences to something simply solved? The last year has been challenging both on the mind and body. We have all seen the emotional impacts of social isolation, uncertainty, and fear. Our places of worship, like many other places, have been closed for our own safety, giving us an opportunity, if we are willing to take it, to think, what is the church? Because it often isn't the building. As I just mentioned, we might not always be getting it right in how we respond to people struggling with their mental health. So being faced with an opportunity to rethink is not necessarily a bad thing, a complex one. People haven't necessarily developed mental illness they didn't have before the pandemic, but there is no doubt that we know of people that are struggling emotionally that weren't before for a whole host of different reasons. And a lot of the ways people find the physical places of worship support their well-being has been taken away. For example, the community, the singing, the prayer, the coffee and catch up you have afterwards, the predictability, a sense of belonging, and the people and the actions speak louder than words, showing the gospel, what you do and how you do it. Faith-based organisations and places of worship have been doing so many positive things to support people's well-being. However, the challenges come with translating this into a world facing a global pandemic. Ultimately, there'll be no miracle formula. Humans are too complex and communities too unique for there to be a quick remote solution to continuing to engage people whilst also supporting their well-being. But if we rewind to learning from the God of 1 Kings, the God that looks at our basic needs first, we can't go wrong. Hannah, do you want to take over?
I've been able to listen to you reading my words, which feels really bizarre. I could hear everything that was happening, but I couldn't speak, so that was really bizarre for me to hear. Yeah, I don't know where we are now on my.
You have an option.
Oh no, I do. Yeah, you have an option to remain in the past or to catch up with the conversation society is having around people's mental health. People are wonderfully complex, but those intricacies in human beings make recovering from illness exceptionally difficult. Be responsive to those in need. Yes, pray for them, but also provide practical support. As we heard from Jessie's story, having a supportive faith-based community around her, such as the one Girls Brigade provided, helped her on her road to recovery by being there for her. I challenge you to take some time to reflect on the narrative you are giving to young people about mental illness and faith, and work towards a new, hope-filled response that includes practical support. Thank you, Jessie, for reading my words. There is some support right there in action.
Well done, everybody, for dealing with tech difficulties. We knew that it was going to happen. But I just want to say, before I hand over to Christine in the panel, I want to say on behalf of you that are listening, a massive thank you to this incredible Delegation of Hope. This team has actually been working, some of them, for over 18 months to deliver this session. We were meant to go to New York last year, but most of you know how that turned out. Our trip was cancelled within 9 hours of notice. So I'm inspired by these young women, and I hope that you have been too. Thank you so much for all your hard work. I'm delighted now to introduce Christine McMillan. She is a friend of GB. She was there 2 years ago when we dreamed up taking this team of young women to NGOCSW. And Christine is a member of the UN Multi-Faith Advisory Council by invitation, and I'm delighted that she's going to lead our panel discussion for the remaining minutes. Thank you so much, Christine. Hopefully, Christine.
Here we are. We're online, and I hope you can see me. But I'm just so pleased to be with you and to share with what has been an inspirational, unbelievable time of listening to those who have such stories, such wisdom at a young age. We have our panel before us, and we're grateful that the Right Reverend Sarah, Bishop Sarah of London with the Anglican Church, is with us. Sarah, you were a member of the Girls Brigade, I understand, and you're well into your vocation, but can you help understand with us what are some of the challenges for you as a woman in a faith-based context to exercise your own leadership?
Yeah, thank you, Christine. And can I add my thanks to those wonderful young women. I mean, they are inspirational, aren't they? And I feel very privileged to have had a background in the Girls Brigade. You know, and listening to some of the stories, I recognise that, you know, there is a real challenge across the world, and I feel very blessed for where I am in the UK, and I recognise the challenge for women and girls has been much harder than maybe mine. But I'm also conscious that the water in which I swim in colludes, in fact, with some of those stories, terrible stories that we've heard, really. And whereas in the UK we've made, you know, huge strides in terms of representation in public, as women, but the truth is that the place in which I occupy, the place of the public square, has been shaped really by men, and whilst that we have more women in it, clearly we continue to be a minority, whether it's Parliament, the judicial or academia, and that's true for faith communities. So here in the Church of England, it's only 25 years since women have been able to be ordained, and only between 15 and 20% of our priests are women, and we've only been able to be bishops since 2014. And so therefore I recognise, you know, the environment in which I work have been shaped by men. And even in London today, there are those priests within my diocese who do not accept my ministry as a bishop or as a priest. And as a focus of unity, as a bishop who is a focus of unity, I need to enable their ministry to flourish as much as those who support my role. And I guess one of my challenges is, when are they occupying a theological space, or when are they using that theological space to perpetuate inequality and injustice against women? And that for me sometimes is a very hard balance. But I heard some of the words that have been said before, particularly by Helen, that in a sense it is my faith that helps me through. It's me knowing that I'm of worth and of value by God. You know, God, you know, Isaiah tells us that we are called by name and he has made us his own. And it's in that where I seek my value, and my faith enables me to flourish in that world.
Beautiful. Bishop Sarah, I think what you're saying to us, that position doesn't mean we've arrived at equality.
Oh, gosh, no.
It's the attitude, it's the culture, it's what you're contending with in carving the way as the first woman bishop. But then we have different ways to communicate, because on our panel as well, we have Chinny McDonald. She's writes, she's an author, she's a broadcaster, and her particular emphasis on race, faith, and gender is critical. You're also leading the community fundraising and public engagement with Christian Aid. So Chinny, how are you dealing with the challenges, even in a faith-based context, with your own writing, your own insights. Let's hear from you.
Yes, thank you so much. It's really great to be here. And I too have been really challenged by what some of the young people and the young women that we heard earlier were saying. And there's a part of me that wants to despair at just the sheer scale of things that we need to tackle in terms of injustices against women, both internally but also externally as well. So I think from my context, I work in international development at Christian Aid, and I have spent a lot of my career within faith-based institutions and leadership within faith-based institutions. And I think faith-based institutions operate within contexts that are also riven with injustices against women. There are the external challenges as well as the internal challenges, I think. So there are these systemic challenges. So globally, the world is a wildly unequal place, with our global economic systems and frameworks tipped towards maleness and whiteness. And while things are changing, there is still much more to do. Women are more likely to face extreme poverty, be the victims of sexual and gender-based violence, to face the full force of climate injustice and floods, droughts and storms. There is so much in the outside world that we are dealing with. And I think within faith-based institutions, unfortunately, sometimes our faith-based institutions exacerbate the inequalities that there are between men and women. And I have found myself in certain contexts in faith-based institutions, when I've been the only person in leadership who looks like me, sometimes finding that I am conforming for some strange reason to what my faith institution or my faith, the negatives about women that are perpetuated or perpetrated by men. So I find that there are also internal challenges. So what are the voices in my own head? What are the voices in our heads that hold us back as women? And which are the voices and the ones that we want to listen to, the messages about ourselves that we want to believe and that we should believe? Now, there is some within the faith-based context that confirm that maleness is superior, but there is also so much in my faith tradition that separates women as justice seekers, as freedom fighters, as people who are equally loved by God and equally worthy of dignity and respect. So how can we increase those voices and kind of silence the other ones?
Sinead, you've reminded us that the internal circles of faith communities need to be addressing themselves as to their own quality of relationships and to have the courage to face what we see as almost idyllic as people of faith needs to be challenged in ways that become uncomfortable, like we've heard today from the Girls Brigade. And so I thank you that you're a writer, that you can express those things. And in our conversations then, we pick up on your writings and we introduce those questions. And then we go to our third member of the panel, who must be just glowing today, from Zimbabwe, the president of the Girls Brigade. And we introduce Priscilla Penny, who as well has looked at the dignity of girls by involving herself in a project for sanitary respect for girls and products. But you're so much more than that. Priscilla, you and I share the same denomination of faith, and we discovered that. We're both members of the Salvation Army. But what is it for you in a Christian context that challenges you as a woman in exercising your own leadership?
Thank you very much, Christine. And of course, I'm glowing. I'm so proud of what the girls have delivered today. And as other speakers have already spoken, although the highest percentage of people in the church or Christians is women, the leadership is still dominated by men. And for me, the greatest challenges are the cultural expectations, because although we are leaders, or I am a leader, I'm still going back or looking back bound by the cultural expectations, which give us pressure. And sometimes they interrupt the way the Holy Spirit is working to shape our thinking. When we look at what I could teach or what we could talk about in faith, look at FGM. It's social status for a woman. It's supposed to be a sign or take you into womanhood. So when you look at that as a subject and as a violation of the human being, culturally it binds you, and we have to sort of free our minds, because society expects us. And even as a leader in the faith-based organization, you still want to achieve that status of womanhood, and people look at a person and think they must do this in order for them to qualify to be a woman. And also we look at the girls were talking of harassment on the streets. If you are looking at cases of sexual abuse, instead of addressing the victim, they will ask, what was she wearing? How was she behaving? Was she behaving in any way to attract their attention? They are not looking at the man that has done that. They are looking at the victim and asking the questions. So the woman is the one that carries shame. And it's unfortunate because even the church, when a girl gets pregnant outside marriage, there's a stigma attached to that, and she carries the shame. And we are there as faith leaders, but because of the cultural background, we stand to judge that person, and at the end of the day, that girl does not belong to the mother's union. She cannot belong to the girls, so she's left with nowhere to belong. But I'm happy and proud to be part of the solution, because the Girls Brigade provides that safe space for a second chance. So as a woman of faith, those challenges, because it's the male ears that will be listening, it's dominated by males in leadership. It's difficult for our voices to be heard. Those are the challenges that we are facing.
Well, listen, friends, this has been 90 minutes of encouragement, of challenge and inspiration. And I said to Claire, record it, and let's get this 90 minutes out into the world. Let's keep talking together. We have found a spirit of being bonded on issues that so many people are struggling with, including ourselves. And so, Claire, this is the panel that's inspired by your girls and yourself as leadership. And we hand it back to you with the promise that we will act on our words and we will keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much, Christine, and thank you so much, everybody. And I just, before you go, I would love if everybody could turn their microphone on so we can see everybody on screen one last time, all the panelists, all the Delegation of Hope. And thank you so much for joining us on this journey. It has been over 18 months in the making, and these young women, and there are so many other young women like them, part of Girls Brigade, they inspire me every day, and I'm really praying that they also inspire you. And I started the webinar with the words of Amanda Gorman: there is always hope if only we are brave enough to see it. if only we are brave enough to be it. And I pray that you've been inspired by these young women who are brave enough to not only see hope, but be hope. Thank you so much for joining us. If you would like to learn more about Girls Brigade, we have a website, www.gbworldwide.org. Thank you so much, everybody, and well done to the team and well done to the panel. Goodbye.